to my channel. My name is Darian and today I am going to be talking about all the books that I read in January. So in January I read 8 books. It's the most I've read in a while. I can't believe I don't know how I read 8 books in January. January felt like it was really long, but it also felt like I wasn't reading anything, so I was really surprised to see that I read 8 books. But anyways, I'm gonna try to get through these books kind of quickly because all of my wrap-ups end up being like some of my longest videos, and I'm gonna try to make this video shorter than 30 minutes. We'll see how that goes. Also, it is late afternoon right now. It is getting darker, so we're gonna try to get through this sort of quickly. We'll see how that goes because I tend to talk a lot. But yeah, so let's just get into the books that I read in January. I don't know if you can hear the wind, but she's angry today. But the first book that I finished in January was In Holidays by Christina Lauren. I actually started this book when I did my 24-hour readathon on New Year's Eve, so I'll leave that video linked up above if you want to hear me explain my thoughts on the first like 3/4 of this book, because I didn't actually, the wind is distracting me. I didn't actually finish it in that video, but yeah, I finished this within the first few days of January. But this book follows this girl named, what's her name? Maylin, but they call her something else, but it's not May, I don't think. We're following this girl and she feels kind of lost in her life. Like, she feels like she's not going anywhere with her career. She's not in a relationship. She just feels kind of stuck. And every year her and her family go to this cabin for Christmas, and they go with her family and their family friends. So they go every single year and it's like the highlight of their Christmas holidays. And this year she's leaving the cabin and she finds out that her family friends who own the cabin are planning on selling it. So that was their last year at the cabin. So especially after that, she feels like, you know, incredibly lost, like, and now she's losing this thing that she loves so much. So on her way home from the cabin, she's thinking to herself, like, she's kind of asking the universe, like, what am I supposed to do? Please help me, something like that. I don't remember exactly what. Oh no, she says, please show me what will make me happy. That's what she says. Then she gets into a car accident and she wakes up on the plane on the way to the cabin like a week earlier. So this is kind of like a Groundhog Day situation. I think it happens 3 or 4 times where something will happen and it'll be some sort of accident, and then she wakes up again on the plane on the way to the cabin on like December 20th or something. So that definitely added a fun aspect to the book, but I didn't love this. These first few books that I read in January, it feels like I read them so long ago, so I'm gonna try my best to explain my thoughts on them, but it feels like I read these ages ago. But I didn't really connect with any of the characters. I didn't really connect with May or Maylin, whatever they call her, and I couldn't help but just keep comparing this to The Unhoneymooners because that's the only other book I've read by Christina Lauren, and I absolutely love that book. It was one of my favorite books of 2020, so this just really didn't live up to what that was for me. And yeah, I didn't really connect with any of the characters. The romance was kind of underwhelming in my opinion, and I didn't really love the love interest, and then the whole like 3rd act breakup that happened, it was such a stupid reason. Like anyways, so it was fine. I gave it 3 stars. I didn't dislike it. It just wasn't anything super special for me. So I mean, it definitely was a cute Christmassy read and I would recommend it if you like those sort of things, but like, this isn't gonna change your life or anything. So yeah. So the next book that I read in January, which again, I cannot believe I read this in January. It feels like months and months ago, but that was Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. I can't believe it took me so long to read this book, but I have finally read it. I listened to the audiobook, which by the way, the audiobook is great. So if you are thinking of picking this up, I do recommend the audiobook. But in case you don't know, because I know the movie especially is extremely popular, but if you don't know, this book follows this man named Nick, and his wife has gone missing, and we kind of go back and forth between present day where she has just gone missing and, you know, he's trying to figure out what happened to her, and then her diary entries like over the years of their marriage. And so you kind of start to find out more information about their marriage through these diary entries, and the more the book goes on, it kind of seems like maybe Nick has something to do with her disappearance, but you're not really sure what's going on. And this book, I've heard so many people talk about the plot twist of this book. There's this huge plot twist that everyone talks about, and I was hoping that I didn't know what the plot twist was because I have seen a lot of things about the movie. So there were some things that I already knew about the story before I started reading it, but I was hoping that I didn't know about the big plot twist, but it turns out I did. So when that happened, I wasn't shocked or anything. I was just like, oh, I saw that from stuff from the movie. I haven't even seen the movie, but I feel like people just post about it all the time. So I wasn't like super shocked, and I was actually really enjoying the story. I really liked every direction it took. I don't really want to say too much because it is a mystery thriller, so I think it's best to go into this not knowing too much. Hopefully, if you haven't seen the movie, you didn't know as much as I did going into it. And then I found the ending of this book really anticlimactic. Like, I kept waiting for this like really shocking ending or something like that, because that seemed like where it was building up to, and then we got to the end and I was like, is that it? Like, I don't know, I kind of wish the ending was a bit more big than how it ended. So I did give this book 4 stars. Like, I really enjoyed it. I think it's a great book. I just was kind of missing something from that ending. And I do want to mention that there are trigger warnings for mention of rape in this book, so just keep that in mind before you read it. But I definitely would recommend this book if you are looking for mystery thrillers to read, especially since this one is talked about so much on BookTube, and I really want to watch the movie now because everyone loves the movie, so now I can watch it. But yeah, the next book I read in January was One by One by Ruth Ware. This was my first Ruth Ware book, and this book has gotten a lot of mixed reviews. I've seen a lot of people say that they were really underwhelmed by this book, that they were really disappointed. I really liked this. I thought this was a really fun book. So this follows this group of coworkers from this startup company who go to this like wintry retreat in France? In the French Alps, and you kind of switch between the point of views of one of the people who works at this chalet and then one of the co-workers. After staying there for like a day, I think, there's this like huge avalanche of snow and they end up getting snowed in, and then people start dying one by one. Get it? And again, I don't want to say too much more after that because this is a mystery thriller, so it's best not to know too much before going in. But I mean, I know this wasn't like the craziest mystery thriller out there, and I do feel like for people who have read a lot of mystery thrillers, I do see why maybe this wouldn't be as good as some other ones that people love, because look at this lighting right now. It looks pretty nice, honestly. But anyways, I got distracted. Wow. Okay. For people who do read a lot of mystery thrillers, I do understand why they wouldn't like this as much as some other books that they've read, but I haven't read a lot of mystery thrillers, so I just thought this was really fun. And I did see a lot of people saying that they guessed who the murderer was like right away, and I did think when you find out who it is, it's kind of like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, it's not super shocking or anything, but it's not like I figured it out right away. I was still like, okay, it could be this person, maybe it's this person. I mean, there's only so many people it could be because it is an isolated setting, which, by the way, I love an isolated setting. I don't know if I knew that before reading this book, but it turns out I do, so that's great. Also, the ending to this book, I was so stressed. I thought it was a great ending, honestly. Like, I just really enjoyed this book. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I really recommend it. Since this is like a very snowy setting, I read this at the perfect time because when I read it, there was like a lot of snowstorms and stuff, so it's definitely a very cozy wintry read in my opinion, and I would really recommend it. I gave it 4 stars. I thought it was a lot of fun, and I'm really excited to read more books by Ruth Ware. It's hard to say her name. I want to say Ruth Ware. But yeah, and also trigger warnings for sexual assault in this book, but I really enjoyed it and I would recommend it. The next book I read in January was In the Dream House by Carmen Maria Machado. This is the book that I read for the Buzzwordathon for January because the prompt was to read a book with the word dream in the title, so In the Dream House. We get it. This is a memoir about Carmen Maria Machado's experience in an abusive relationship, and this book was just like, I cannot stress enough, please, if you think the topic of domestic abuse will be triggering to you, please maybe don't pick this up, or wait until you feel like you will be okay enough to pick this up, because this was a really dark read, and I listened to the audiobook, and this was definitely really hard to listen to at times. Like, she doesn't hold anything back. This was such a raw story. She really put everything into writing this novel, and I really commend her for writing this and publishing it, because I just think it's a really brave thing to do, to write your experiences that are clearly so painful, and to just be so open about what you've gone through. Like, I really admire her for doing this, and I feel really privileged to read her story, even though it was such a hard read. Like, I feel like she could help so many people with this story, and this was definitely one of the most beautiful books I think I've ever read. Like, the writing in this was so beautiful. Like, she is just such a talented writer, and it makes me really want to pick up some of her other books. I know she has some fiction books out as well. This is definitely a book that I would recommend as long as you feel like you would be okay to read this, because like I said, this could definitely be extremely triggering for people. There's also homophobia in this book. Carmen Maria Machado is bisexual, and the woman that she was in this relationship with is a lesbian, and they both dealt with a lot of homophobia. Yeah, I just make sure you're okay enough to read this book, but if you are, I would really highly recommend it. I just thought it was so amazing. I gave it 4.5 stars. I think the only reason I didn't give it 5 stars was sometimes, like, her writing was just so beautiful, but sometimes I just didn't really know what she was saying, because like, she used a lot of metaphors, a lot of similes, and they were so beautiful, but sometimes I just really didn't understand the connections, and that could just be like my own fault of just, you know, reading comprehension or something. But 4.5 stars, it was an amazing book, and I really recommend it to everyone who thinks they can read it. Okay. The next book I read, I really don't know how to describe it, because I think it's just really best to go into this book knowing as little as possible. So the next book I read was Moon of the Crested Snow by Wagisha Grice, and I'm gonna give a very brief synopsis, because it's also a really short book, so like, it would be easy to give too much away. But the very basic synopsis is that we're following this indigenous community living in a reservation up north, and one day they lose power and they lose phone service. You know, their pipes stop working, their electricity stops working, and they don't know why. And that's really all I want to say, because I feel like I can't say more than that. So I know that's a super basic synopsis, but this book was so good. Oh my god, this was such a good book. I know Books and Lala really loves this book, and I can see why. It was so well written, and the pacing of this book was so good. Like, I don't know, oh my god, it was so good. It's a pretty short book, but it is a really slow read. Like, you're following the main character Evan, and I mean, obviously he doesn't know what's going on, and it takes a really long time to what can I even say? Okay, it's just a really slow read. Sometimes I did find it a bit too slow. Like, sometimes I was just like, okay, let's because I really just was anxious to find out what was really going on, and there's just some very unsettling elements to this story. Definitely a trigger warning for suicide in this book. Well, also death. Yeah, I don't know what else to say. Like, I really just feel like it's best to know as little as possible going into this book. One thing I will say is that in the book, when all of this starts happening, it's right before winter, and since they're living up north, they get a lot of snow, and they go through a lot of snow, like really bad snowstorms. And I listened to the audiobook for this, and I kept listening to it when I would go on walks when it was snowing a lot, so like, the atmosphere was immaculate. Like, I really felt like I was in it, and this book was just really, it was creepy and eerie, and you just never really know what's going on, and it feels like any second like something big can happen. But I would say this is definitely a very quiet book. Like, again, I just don't know how to talk about this. I just really, I need you to read it. I did give this 4 stars just because, like I said, I did find it a bit too slow sometimes. Like, I really just wanted to keep going sometimes. And also, I kept getting, there were a lot of side characters, and I kept getting them mixed up, because like, some of them I found had similar names. There was one guy named Terry and someone else named Tyler, I think, and I kept getting them mixed up. I kept forgetting which character was who, how they were related, like, and that might have been because I was listening to the audiobook. So I would really like to reread this book one day and read it physically, and I feel like that would be the best way for me to consume this story. But also the ending of this book like I finished it and then I just sat there and I was like it's one of those books where you just kind of have to look out into the distance and be like, what? So yeah, I would really like to reread this book. Like, this is kind of one of those stories that I feel like I just need to write a paper on it or something and analyze it. Like, again, I know I didn't say like too much about what it's about, but I really highly recommend this book. I thought it was really good and I really want to reread it one day. Okay, the next book I read in January was Keeper of the Lost Cities by Shannon Messenger. This is a middle grade book about this girl named Sophie who is 12 years old, and ever since she was like 5 years old, I think, she has been able to read people's minds, and she's never really figured out why until one day she is discovered by these elves who bring her back to their world, and she is kind of whisked away to this magical place where she finds out that she is also part elf, and so she kind of leaves her human life behind and is living with these elves, and she goes to this school for the elves. I find it really weird that they're called elves because that immediately puts a picture in my head of like Christmas elves, and that's really not what they are. Like, they look like this is an elf. Well, they're both elves on the cover. Like, they just look, well, according to the description, they look pretty similar to humans, so I don't know why they're called elves, but anyways. And yeah, you just kind of follow her as she's discovering this new world that she's brought into, and she's definitely very mysterious. She has some powers that people don't really understand, and there's a lot that happens in this book, honestly. And also, for some reason, every boy she meets her age like falls in love with her immediately, and I'm like, okay, she's 12, like let's calm down a bit. There's like at least 3 or 4, I think there's maybe 5 even, guys who meet her and they're just like, hi Sophie. And I'm like, okay guys, let's settle down now. For most of this book, I would say it was sitting at around a 3-star, but then the ending, I really loved the ending. I was so, like, all of a sudden, I was so much more invested in everything that was going on, and I really cared about the characters, and I just thought the ending was really great, and it makes me really excited to continue the series because there are like a million books in the series. I think there's 8 right now, and there's supposed to be more, so I'm definitely excited to continue this series, and I think the characters do get a bit older as the series goes on, so I am excited about that because, I mean, like, obviously this is a middle grade, so these kids are gonna act like kids, which makes sense, but Sophie just got on my nerves a lot sometimes, and I was like, please please stop. So I am excited to see them get older, but yeah, I really love the ending of this book, so I ended up giving it 4 stars because, I don't know, the ending just really saved it for me. Not that I wasn't liking it, but it was just pretty like okay until the end. I did end up liking a lot of the characters. If anyone was wondering, I am Team Keefe. I don't know why, but there's something about that boy. I really like him. I find him funny, and yeah, I like Keefe. Dex is pretty annoying. Is his name Dex or Dax? I think it's Dex. Dex. Yeah, Dex is kind of annoying, and I don't know how I feel about Fitz. So Keefe, I love Keefe. But yeah, so I really enjoyed this, and I would definitely recommend if you're looking to get into middle grade, and I'm really excited to continue the series. The next book I read was Hurricane Child by Case and Callender. This was my first Case and Callender book. I'm so excited. I finally read one of their books, and this one, again, I don't really know how to explain what this book is about because I really didn't know much before going into it, so I don't want to say too much, but we're following this girl named Caroline, and she's living with her father on St. Thomas, or in St. Thomas, or on St. Thomas, because it's an island. Do you say on? I think it's on St. Thomas. She lives with her father, and her mother had left them suddenly, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, something like that. Caroline, this is another middle grade, so Caroline is I think 12. And yeah, her mother left them suddenly. She doesn't know where her mother went, but her mother has been sending her postcards from Europe, and so we know that she's alive, we just don't know where she is, and Caroline doesn't really understand why her mother would just leave her like that. So we have that element of the story, and also Caroline is kind of known as being an unlucky child because she was born during a hurricane, so she's often bullied at school. Like, she doesn't really have any friends. Even the teachers kind of bully her, which is messed up. I don't understand how they could be teachers if they're treating a child like this. So it's really, her life is really sad, and when these kids were bullying her, like, oh my god, makes me so angry. And then one day there's a new girl at school, and her and this new girl become friends, and this new girl says that she will help her find her mom. And also Caroline is kind of starting to discover her sexuality because she is feeling these feelings for this new girl that she thinks might be a bit more than just friendship. And so there's a lot of elements to this book, and there's also a bit of magical realism, but I really like this book. The only thing is that for all the things that this book was trying to do, I feel like it needed to be a bit longer, and some of these things needed to be a bit expanded more. Because there was so much, like, I wanted to know more about her mother and this new girl and her feelings for this new girl, and also these magical realism elements. Like, I wanted to know more about all of these things, and I feel like this book just needed to be a little bit longer just to expand on those things a bit more. But other than that, I really like this book. I gave it 4 stars, and I will say trigger warnings for attempted suicide and for homophobia in this book. I feel like this is a really important book, especially for young Black queer girls to see themselves represented in this way. I just feel like this would be so important for a girl growing up who is feeling these similar feelings to Caroline, and to see herself represented in this book, I think it's just so amazing. But yeah, definitely keep in mind the trigger warnings for this book, because it is a bit upsetting, the homophobic remarks that are made in this book, and also the mention of attempted suicide, so just keep those in mind. But I really like this book, and I would definitely recommend it. And finally, the last book that I read in January was Lore by Alexandra Bracken. This book, it was something. This was the Winer's Book Club book for January, and I didn't love it. So I don't even know how to explain this book, but essentially this is a urban fantasy, and we're following this girl named Lore, and in this world, basically there's this thing that happens every 7 years called the Aegon, and the like major Greek gods, for 1 week every 7 years they become mortal, and so these hunters are hunting them, and if they're able to kill one of these gods, then the god dies, obviously, and then whoever killed them kind of adopts their power and becomes the new god. So for example, if someone killed Poseidon, then Poseidon would die, but then whoever killed him would become the new Poseidon, and they would have Poseidon's powers, and so then they would be hunted at the next Aegon. Does that make sense? I hope so, because it barely made sense in this book. So we're following Lore, and she's kind of removed herself from this world because of a bunch of things that happened in her past. Her family was murdered, and she doesn't really want anything to do with this world, until one day during the Aegon, this friend that she thought was dead kind of comes back into her life and needs her help, and also one of the gods has been injured and also needs her help. And so she's kind of brought back into this world, and shenanigans ensue. This I just didn't like it. I mean, I will leave Rachel's Goodreads review linked down below, because Rachel said it way better than I ever could. I'll also leave our live show link down below if you want to watch it, because again, Rachel said everything that I wish I could say about this book as eloquently, but I never really cared about the characters. The only character that I kind of liked was Castor, who is like the male love interest in this book, and that's only because he's a soft boy and I love soft boys. But even then, like, I didn't care that much about his character. I didn't really care about Lore. I didn't find there was enough development for any of the characters. I thought the pacing in this book was just really weird. Like, sometimes it would be so fast paced and then nothing would happen for like 100 pages. Like, I found the beginning of this book really boring, and then something happened and I was like, oh my god, we're getting into it. I'm gonna love this book now. And then it just stopped. It stopped being interesting and it got back to being really boring. And then something kind of interesting would happen and then it would be really boring. And so I was like, okay, this is really messy. And I found this read like a debut, but Alexandra Bracken is not a debut author. She's written books before and this is the first one I've read. So I'm a little worried to read some of her backlist because I don't know, I just really didn't like this book. I gave it 2 stars and I honestly never really want to talk about it again. This cover is really beautiful, honestly, so it really sucks that the book wasn't very good, but yeah. And the ending, I just didn't like it, and I never want to think about it again, so I don't really recommend this unless you want to pick it up. I suppose you can. Oh yeah, and trigger warning in this book for sexual assault, which in my opinion was not handled very well, but just keep that in mind. But I don't really recommend this. So yeah. So those are the books that I read in January. I feel like I got through that relatively quickly. I guess I'll see when I edit this. Let me know what books you guys read in January, what books you liked, what books you didn't like. Have you read any of the books I read in January? Let me know. But yeah, that's it for today. Thank you guys so much for watching. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys soon with another video soon. Bye!